For centuries, Tibet had been divided. Rival rulers fought for power. Religious schools competed for influence. Civil wars reshaped the land, and many believed Tibet would never be united again. But in the 17th century, everything began to change. A Buddhist monk, a Mongol warrior, and a series of events that would transform the destiny of an entire nation. By the end of this story, a new government would rule Tibet. A great palace would rise above Lhasa. An emperor would seek an audience with the Dalai Lama, and one of the most remarkable chapters in Tibetan history would unfold. But before any of that could happen, the alliance between the monk and the warrior would face its greatest test. When we left our story, Tibet stood on the edge of transformation. The young Fifth Dalai Lama had been recognized. The Gelug school faced powerful enemies. And beyond Tibet's mountains, a Mongol ruler named Gushri Khan had become an ally. What happened next would change Tibetan history forever, because the alliance between the monk and the warrior was about to be tested, and the outcome would determine the future of an entire nation. The first target was not the Tsongpa dynasty, it was the kingdom of Beri in eastern Tibet. Its ruler had become notorious for persecuting Gelug monasteries and monks. For years, tensions had been growing. Now, Gushri Khan decided to act. His armies advanced across the rugged landscapes of eastern Tibet. The campaign was swift, fortresses fell, resistance collapsed, and the ruler of Beri was defeated. For supporters of the Gelug school, the victory was more than military success. It was proof that the balance of power was beginning to change. But everyone understood that the real struggle still lay ahead. Because the most powerful force in Tibet remained the Songpa dynasty. For decades, the Songpa rulers had dominated central Tibet. They possessed wealth, influence, allies, and powerful fortifications. Most importantly, they had no intention of surrendering power. War became inevitable. As the conflict expanded, Tibet was drawn into one of the most significant struggles in its history. Different Tibetan factions chose sides. Old rivalries resurfaced, political disputes merged with religious competition, and all across the country, people waited to see who would emerge victorious. The campaign lasted for years. Gushri Khan's forces pushed steadily forward. Town after town fell, stronghold after stronghold surrendered. Eventually, the fighting concentrated around the great fortress of Somdrubse near Shigatse. This was the heart of Songpa power. The fortress was formidable. Its defenders believed it could survive any siege. For months they resisted. Hope remained. Perhaps reinforcements would arrive. Perhaps the Mongols would withdraw. Perhaps fortune would change. It did not. The siege continued. Supplies dwindled, morale weakened, and finally the Tsongpa leadership surrendered. The civil war that had divided Tibet reached its conclusion. The old order was finished. The nation stood at a crossroads, and now one man held overwhelming military power. Gushri Khan, a descendant of the family of Genghis Khan, a victorious conqueror, a ruler whose armies had defeated every major opponent. Most conquerors in history would have claimed the throne. Most would have ruled directly. But what happened next stunned everyone. Instead of establishing himself as king of Tibet, Gushri Khan formally recognized the authority of the Fifth Dalai Lama. The moment was extraordinary. A Mongol military victory had changed the balance of power. Yet political and spiritual authority would rest with a Tibetan monk. The Fifth Dalai Lama was no longer merely the head of a religious tradition. He had become the ruler of a unified Tibetan state. For the first time in centuries, Tibet possessed a central authority capable of governing the country as a whole. History had changed direction. But the Great Fifth understood something important. Winning power was only the beginning. Keeping it was far more difficult. The next challenge was building a government capable of holding the nation together. To accomplish this, he established the Ganden Phodrang government. Named after his residence at Drepung Monastery, it became the foundation of Tibetan administration. Officials were trained, institutions were reorganized, a centralized system gradually emerged. For the first time in generations, Tibet possessed a government that could operate across the country. The Fifth Dalai Lama also invested heavily in education. New opportunities were created for both monk officials and lay administrators. Subjects included administration, languages, astrology, and diplomacy. He was not simply building a government, he was building a state. At the same time, he worked to stabilize relations among different religious traditions. This was not always easy. Some policies remain controversial even today. Yet compared with many rulers of his era, he sought a relatively broad vision for Tibet. He understood that lasting stability required more than military victory. It required legitimacy. And soon, an opportunity arrived to strengthen that legitimacy on an international scale. Far to the east, China was undergoing dramatic change. The Ming dynasty had fallen. The Qing dynasty had risen. A young emperor named Shunzi now ruled from Beijing, and he wanted to meet the Dalai Lama. At first glance, the invitation seemed straightforward. In reality, it carried enormous political significance. One question overshadowed everything else. Would the Dalai Lama be treated as an equal ruler or as a subordinate? The answer mattered, not only for Tibet, not only for China, but for the future interpretation of relations between the two powers. Preparations began. The journey would be immense. Thousands accompanied the Dalai Lama, crossing mountains, grasslands, and vast distances. The delegation traveled toward Beijing. The expedition itself became a statement of prestige. When the fifth Dalai Lama finally arrived, the Qing court welcomed him with great ceremony. Special accommodations had been prepared. Grand receptions were organized. Lavish gifts were exchanged. The emperor honored the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama honored the emperor. Yet beneath the ceremonies remained a deeper question. What exactly was this relationship? For Tibetans, it reflected the ancient patron-priest model, a partnership between two authorities, one providing spiritual guidance, the other offering protection. For later Chinese interpretations, the relationship carried different implications. Centuries afterward, historians would continue debating the meaning of that meeting. But regardless of interpretation, one fact is undeniable. The fifth Dalai Lama left Beijing with greater prestige than ever before. His authority had been recognized across much of Asia. Now he turned his attention toward the project that would become his greatest visible legacy, the Potala Palace. To understand why the Potala mattered, we must first understand Red Mountain. Long before the fifth Dalai Lama, this site held enormous symbolic importance. Ancient Tibetan kings had been associated with it. Legends surrounded it. History lived within it. The Great Fifth wanted to create something extraordinary, not merely a residence, not merely a government building, a symbol, a statement, a monument to a new Tibet. Construction began in 1645. Thousands of workers participated. Materials were carried across difficult terrain. Year after year, the structure grew. Visitors watched as an immense palace emerged above Lhasa. The White Palace came first. Government offices moved inside. Administration expanded. The Potala became the center of Tibetan political life. Yet the project was far from finished. The most ambitious sections still remained, and time was running out. Because while the palace rose higher above the city, the Great Fifth was growing older. For decades, he had governed, negotiated, written, taught, and built. Few leaders in Tibetan history matched his energy. His literary output alone exceeded that of all other Dalai Lamas combined. He wrote history, philosophy, religious works, autobiographical accounts, poetry, visionary texts. He was simultaneously a ruler, scholar, diplomat, mystic, and nation builder. Yet even great rulers cannot escape mortality. In 1682, the great Fifth Dalai Lama died. Most governments would have announced the news immediately. Tibet did not. Instead, one of the most extraordinary political secrets in history began. His regent, Sangye Gyatso, faced a difficult choice. The Potala Palace remained unfinished. The political situation remained fragile. Enemies still existed. Foreign powers still watched Tibet closely. The regent feared that announcing the Dalai Lama's death could destabilize everything he had built. So he made a remarkable decision. The death would remain secret. Days passed, weeks passed, months passed. No announcement came. Officials continued their duties. Visitors were informed that the Dalai Lama was in retreat. Government business continued. Letters continued to leave the palace. Orders continued to be issued. The illusion endured. 1 year became 5. 5 became 10. 10 became 15. For 15 years, Tibet functioned as though its ruler were still alive. Think about that. An entire nation maintaining one of history's greatest political secrets. Meanwhile, the search for the next Dalai Lama quietly continued. Eventually, the child who would become the 6th Dalai Lama was identified. Preparations were made. And finally, in 1697, the truth emerged. The great Fifth had been dead for 15 years. The revelation shocked many. Some admired the regent's strategy, others criticized the deception. But one reality could not be denied. The government had survived. The transition had succeeded, and the Potala Palace had been completed. The vision of the great Fifth endured. Today, centuries later, his legacy remains visible across Tibetan history. He united a divided land, built institutions that lasted for generations, strengthened Tibet's position in Asia, created the Potala Palace, and transformed the office of the Dalai Lama into both a spiritual and political institution. His life continues to influence historical debates even today. Questions surrounding Tibet, China, sovereignty, and diplomacy often trace their roots back to decisions made during his reign. That is why history remembers him differently, not simply as the Dalai Lama, not merely as a monk, but as one of the most consequential figures in Tibetan history. A child of prophecy, a scholar, a statesman, a nation builder, a ruler whose influence extended beyond his lifetime. The Mongol alliance helped secure his position. His leadership helped unify Tibet. The Potala Palace preserved his vision. And history gave him a title no other Dalai Lama permanently carries: the Great Fifth Dalai Lama.